the Experiential Learning Hub. And I'm excited to be joined today by two of our psychology students and a recent graduate of the University of Guelph psychology program, Dalia Ahmed. Dalia is joining us today to share some of her experiences since her graduation from University of Guelph and telling us a little bit more about her psychology journey. But before we begin, I am going to have our students introduce themselves. So Ella, if you want to start.
Yeah, for sure. Hi, everybody. My name is Ella. I'm a first-year psychology student. Just finished my first year, which is really exciting. And I'm also the first-year representative for the Psychology Society.
Hi, everyone. My name is Nida. I'm a second-year psychology student. I'm also on the Psychology Society as the marketing coordinator, and I'm really happy to be here to have this conversation with all of you.
Great, thank you. And Dalia, if you could introduce yourself and potentially share with us what have you been up to as far as kind of different jobs you may have had and academics pursuits that you've done since graduating at U of G.
Yeah, of course. So my name is Dalia. It's been a long journey, honestly. There's a lot of pieces to it. And I guess I could start right from the start. And so I went to Guelph and I majored in psychology. And I tried to keep my doors open as much as possible. I tried to keep, trying as much as possible. Psychology, especially in undergrad, every course is actually a whole field of psychology. So trying as many different things as possible was great. I tried to do a co-op program. So I actually ended up graduating from a co-op program. And then I applied a couple times for master's. It's actually pretty common to not get in the first year. It takes a couple tries sometimes. And so in the second year, I got into the University of Toronto's clinical counseling psychology program. And right now I'm doing my training, my placement at KMH at the integrated day treatment program in the anxiety and mood disorder clinic. And it's pretty intense, but it's been a journey and it just keeps growing. So it's one step after the next.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. And I not to highlight your failures, but I do like that you had to point out that you had to apply twice, as far as 2 different years to really get your foot in the door. So that's good to hear. I'm sure that'll be calming for some students.
Yeah. And I didn't know that either. And I was super stressed out the first time because I did get interviews the first time and then I didn't get in. And I remember I was doing my thesis with one of my supervisors at Guelph and I was almost crying to her and she was calling me and she said, you know what, it's not that students are not that students are not good. It's the system. There's just not enough spaces and it's so competitive. So, but it gives you a chance. It gives you a chance to be out in the real world and kind of see what you like and who you are as a personality and where you would fit and just trying different things. And I think that part was also very valuable in figuring out how I am in my master's and how I want to continue. Even I'm actually starting a doctorate program at U of T in September. So just, thank you. So it continues, those parts were actually grown during that time off when I was reapplying. So it's nothing bad, actually. It's a chance for you to continue growing.
Yeah, for sure. I also find that really nice to hear because, even as a first-year student, I'm really stressed out about masters. And I know that it can be really, really competitive and hard to get into. So it's really nice to hear that, it's not you, it's just the system. I think that's really important to keep in mind. Kind of building off of the last question, why did you choose to study and ultimately get work in the mental health field?
Yeah, so I think that kind of goes back to personality. And I feel like most of my peers and colleagues all have maybe different backgrounds, but we, having a background where I was a support to people in my life and that just kind of felt natural. It felt, I enjoyed it. I enjoy I'm a people person. And so it's important to know that if you are a people person, if you can actually talk to people all day, if you like to learn about people, And also if you're able to, you know, kind of explore different perspectives and different lives, different backgrounds, it's really important, because sometimes, you know, some people, as they continue with the field, they realize, actually, I like learning about it, but I don't want to be, you know, working with people. Maybe it's better to do academia, and I want to be a prof, and I want to do research. And that's still contributing to mental health, but it's also knowing, where do you fit?
That's such a great point, and the fact that there's so many different ways to be involved in mental health is, I'm so glad that you mentioned that. I guess to go off of the whole thing about you being in your master's program, when you were applying to further education programs in fourth year, what were you looking into? So what made you ultimately choose U of T's degree in clinical counseling and applied psychology?
Yeah, that's a great question, because I didn't. I wasn't choosing U of T. I had a few. I wanted to apply to all the counseling programs in Ontario. I even applied to some outside of Ontario, because I wanted to keep my options open, right? I wanted to see different programs actually offer different strengths. And originally, I wanted Guelph's counseling program, because it was couple and family, and I thought this is actually really great. It has a lot of strengths of, it's like a smaller cohort that gets in, and it has more hours. So I thought that was really great. But I actually really enjoy being at Toronto, because it offers, you know, being in Toronto also has like the community, right? There's a lot of options. And as a person of color, I think I really appreciate being in a city that is full of diversity as well, because it opens up these doors, right, for me to actually push and be a part of those changes. And I think that I actually continue to use that in my work and in my applications. And I think that's something that is really important, especially in this climate, that it is needed, that there's a lot of things that are happening in the world that a lot of people don't understand or have a difficult time understanding. And people who have specific experiences, you know, it's time for them to kind of come out and share those. So I encourage people, you know, to share their own experiences and their own difficulties and use them as strengths.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's a really, really important point, especially right now. Yeah, so thank you for bringing that up. Asking about the application process a little bit. So when did you apply? What did the application materials consist of? And when were you notified of your acceptance?
Yeah, so usually the application happens a lot. It's like a whole year, the process. So the application, I started working on it maybe in like September. Every school requires a statement of intent. And usually in your statement of intent, you'll actually explain, and you'll kind of say why you want to do this, and why you're fit for it. It's kind of like a cover letter, but more in depth. It's like a resume, a CV, academic, all in one. And so this is a chance for you to talk about your experience and what makes you different, like your personal experience. Like you can actually add that in there, and also highlighting your work experience. And I think it's really important to not only highlight, hey, I've worked in all these different places, but also highlighting what you learn and the development and the passion that you've gained, the interest. So just kind of like showing your specific stream through all of this. And the statement of intent, like it takes a while to write. I don't think it's a document that you write in one day or a weekend. It takes like a few months. And I remember University of Toronto, usually their application is due November 15, which is earlier than most places. Some places, you know, it's December 1st or December 15th. There's some places that are like January 15. And then you start hearing back in February. So early acceptances are usually mid-February, and then it stretches out all the way till like May, I would say. Like maybe like end of April, you'll hear about the acceptances, and then you'll hear if you're on the wait list. And even if you're on the wait list, like I remember I was on the wait list for University of Ottawa, and I only heard back in like August, for example. And I've already knew that I was getting, like I got into Toronto and I was going and I already had everything established. But they still keep coming, right? So some people will choose not to go, and those spots fill, like they're empty, and they want to fill it up with somebody new. So it's a whole year process, and it's anxiety provoking. for sure, especially if you're applying twice, right? But as you apply, I think it's also important to continue working on yourself. That just because you've applied doesn't mean that you're done working on yourself, because you don't know. You don't know if you're going to get in or not. And even on my application, I would actually mention the work that I'm doing and things that I am working on and things that I'm anticipating to have done by my start date. Because some places will actually ask you for having like at least 1 year, at least 2 years of experience. If I haven't had that, at least I can highlight that I will have it by the time I'm starting.
Yeah, that's such a great
point. I think
point.
that's one of the pieces, like statement of intent. Then there's like resumes or like CV. So if you are an academic, if that is the field that you're choosing, so highlighting if you've had presentations, if you've written a thesis, if you've gone to conferences, if different research internships. So highlighting all of these, and even the jobs that weren't so like counseling related or psychology related, there are pieces of it that you can highlight, right? Working with people. I know people who have actually gotten into the University of Guelph's program, and most of their paper was written on their work working as like a sales rep at like H&M. But it's the way that you actually talk about your experience and how it's shaped you, why you are fit. It doesn't matter what work you've actually done. And something that I've also realized, a lot of the people who do get into master's programs, and I think most master's programs look for this, is having some crisis intervention experience. And, working with something that's really popular is volunteering with hotlines, like crisis lines. So there is actually one in Guelph. I know something, I think it's called Lighthouse. I'm not sure if it's still open, but at the time I actually volunteered in it after I didn't get in the first time. I volunteered the second year to make sure that I actually had a 4-year experience there before getting in. And then when I got in, most of my colleagues had that similar experience of working at a crisis line. So I think if that's something that people could get into, especially because you guys are in your first years. I was worried that you guys would be in your 4th year, that didn't want to stress you out, but starting early on and kind of filling up and kind of, reaching out for different workplaces is really helpful. I was able to highlight, my work as a residence assistant. I highlighted my work as a library assistant. There's all sorts of different things that could be helpful. So it's about how you word things.
Yeah, for sure. That also sounds like a lot of work to do too. Like the volunteering, all of the huge application process, the resume, the CV, the statement of intent. So I can really see the value in taking that year off. Or if you don't get necessarily in your first application, like taking that year as an opportunity to get more volunteer experience, to get more work experience, and to work on that statement of intent. So thank you so much for sharing that.
Yeah, thank you. And I guess to talk about your experiences specifically, you've shared a lot of great advice so far, but I guess if you could look back at your own experience, what would be one thing you wish you had learned earlier or like during your first couple of years of your undergrad about completing a master's degree? So like what should current prospective students like us, like look out for that we might not be looking out for right now?
I think this is actually a really important one because I wish that I had taken the things that I'm learning and applied it to myself as well. A lot of the time when we're learning all these things, it's always about helping other people. And when you start doing the work, when you get into your master's, and then you start working with people and you're learning about their experience and their trauma, it brings up a lot, right? It brings up a lot. And especially when you're learning a lot of these like concepts and like why people are the way they are and like what are the patterns, you start to like unfold and open up a lot of boxes that maybe you are really great at coping at. But now that you know, it's kind of like, whoa, look, what do I do with this information? And you need to make sure that like, how do I regulate myself so that it doesn't come up, when I am helping other people? So I think this is something that I wish I had done in my undergrad, actually reflecting and sitting with things and really exploring and learning to be okay and accepting that, acceptance and change can be both happening at the same time. And so really sitting with yourself and applying these things to yourself is really important. It's been a really humbling experience, and learning that, therapists and psychologists and all these, we're like wounded healers. We're not just healers. So I think it's really important to do that work, especially right now when the pandemic came up and everybody's kind of like, whoa, like we're all actually experiencing this. Everybody's anxious, everybody's depressed, because of course these things happen when you lose a lot of your daily life, a lot of things that you depended on, and we don't feel like ourselves. So really normalizing these things, that it's everybody, it's not just people who need help. And this is something that you maintain. This is something that takes practice.
Mm-hmm. I love that answer, and I'm so glad that you talked on that aspect of self-reflection and being able to help yourself first, because I realized that, at least in psychology, there's a lot of people that assume that it's all about helping the other, but you can't help anyone else unless you help yourself first. So yeah.
Exactly. We need to make sure that, our glass is full so that we can give others.
Yep.
Yeah, I think that's really important. And I really like the point that you brought up about the pandemic too. Like, this is a collective trauma that we're all experiencing, and we're not going to be able to help other people if we don't unpack our own trauma and take care of it and ensure that we're going to therapy and we're getting the help that we need, and we're getting whatever support that we need. So I really appreciate that. Then I know you talked a little bit about your volunteer experience. You talked about volunteering for a hotline, but I just wanted to inquire about some other experiences. So reflecting on your time at university, are there any experiences that you had, for example, on campus, volunteering in clubs or jobs, that helped you to be successful with your job applications?
Yeah, I would say all of them. There's nothing that I keep out, honestly. In my first year, there was a couple of volunteer opportunities. In the first week or two, they have these events where there's booths and they kind of show you different things. There was a couple actually that I did in my first year. One of them was ESL. It was peer support. It was kind of connecting, and it was really simple. It was, connecting with one person 1 hour a week, and you kind of just engage and help them to learn English. But it's about the dynamic, right? And then the other one that I did was, I think it was a tutor. It was like a teaching assistant at a school nearby in Guelph, and it was helping children with learning disabilities. And it was just kind of understanding. It's kind of just getting my feet out there and seeing, what are people struggling with? What do people need help with? What is it like helping other people? And I was really motivated. I was kind of like you guys, really anxious about in my first year, my prof was like, hey, getting into master's is really hard. And I was like, I need to fill up as much as I can so I can be ready for my master's. And that was the theme the whole time. But at the same time, it was I tried to not make it anxiety provoking. It was about, I really do want to do this. I really do enjoy it. Let me just try it out. Let me see how I like it. And so I also applied to do co-op. I didn't actually originally apply to do co-op, and I just learned about it. And I said, yeah, let me just try. And I was living in residence as well. And so I applied to be an RA because I thought, my residence assistant was really helpful. And whenever I was going through things, I was like, well, this is really cool. This is really fun. And you get paid while you're working on campus. It makes things convenient. So really trying to get as much as I can that was convenient as well, so that I could fit as much as possible. And so that was really helpful working with students as an RA. There are students who are, they're going through a lot. They're going through trauma. They're unpacking. They're transitioning. They're for the first time away from parents and family, maybe away from their home origin, and anxiety, depression. A lot of these things come up, and feeling isolated, learning to connect with others, being a part of the community. It's really important to help people do that. And as we do that, as I did that, I learned a lot of skills. And getting into co-op, the co-op program is actually, I think, a lot of schools don't have co-op for psychology. And I actually have other friends who are really wanting to get into Guelph specifically for the co-op option, because it filled up my resume as well. And not only did it fill up my resume, it has a course for how to apply, how to write cover letters, how to write your resume, how to do interviews. And not only does it have this course, it also, every semester of like right before the co-op semester, you had to apply to a lot of them. So you're learning how to tailor and make changes to each application and how to like brand yourself and how to word things differently. And even if you don't get into the co-op program, the co-op services building is still there. Like that's open to all students. Even after I finished off the co-op semesters, I actually went back to help with my applications for my master's, because it is a pretty similar process of doing interviews, of I wanted somebody to look over and give me like, I need somebody else's like fresh eyes, because sometimes if I'm sitting on the same statement of intent for 3 months, I get lost in it, and that's okay. And that's why it's really helpful. And writing services on campus too, right? These are all really helpful pieces that can help strengthen our application. Like we're not alone, and we're students, we're learning. They're not expecting us to know everything, but they're expecting us to see who is wanting to put in the work and who is going out there to see, because we have those services.
Yeah, for sure. I think that's really important too. Like, I know as a first year student, sometimes I forget to lean on the resources that there are at the University of Guelph, just because I haven't actually been on campus. So that's really important to actually reach out to the co-op office, to writing services, to all of these things, because sometimes you forget that they're there and that they exist and that they're there to support you. So yeah, I really like that.
Totally. Even online, like right now, you know, myself as well, I'm starting to reach out at University of Toronto services for the first time, like learning strategists, you know, when we're having a hard time organizing different parts of our lives between 4 walls. It makes sense that we need that support. We haven't been taught to live like this before. We haven't been taught to learn in these circumstances before. And even the people who are providing the service, they're adapting and they're getting these things and they're learning from us what is working and what's not working. So even us asking for help is actually helping the system improve and helping it help other people as well. And on the side of that as well, I actually worked at the library as well. So I worked at the library for a couple of years. I worked as a resident assistant for a couple of years. And there are courses at Guelph that are internships. And those are pretty great because they count as a credit. It's not a course. You don't have to go to classes. And you're working directly with a professor. And you can help them in different ways depending on the research. And you can actually pick and explore what are the courses that I like. When I reach out to this professor and ask, hey, like I'm going to do this course, I want to do this internship course. Do you have spots in your like lab, for example? And usually you can see on the Guelph website, if you look at the faculty, they have like bios, and they will like kind of explain their research, their interests, if it's trauma with women, if it's cognitive processes. If it's like discrimination, if it's cultural work, there's a lot of pieces, and based on that, you can start to explore. And there's multiple of these, multiple internships. So I've actually done one maybe in with my cognitive psychology prof. I've done one with actually in a different department, which was like the FRHD, which is the Family Relations and Human Development program too. So taking courses and doing internships on that end too. Is really helpful. And then I did one with learning psychology. So I actually went in, it was like with rats, and I was like measuring and like doing things, and I was like playing with rats, and it was really interesting. But I got to learn about like how we learn about addictions and how we learn about these pieces. And like now I'm actually teaching with people in the mood and anxiety disorder how learning processes work. And it's these same processes of reinforcement, of shaping, of punishments, and how that actually helps us to change our lives, to change our behaviors. And so these pieces are really, really helpful. And in the last internship that I did, it was forensic psychology. And it was with the professor that was leading the clinical psychology course. And I got really interested in that program. It was like I was doing like work with adverse childhood experiences, and in the forensic mental health system, I got to go to Hamilton every day, like and kind of do some work in the hospital at St. Joseph's Healthcare Hamilton, and then the work was really nice, and we kind of got along. And then she offered me a summer like URA, I think it's an undergraduate research assistantship, and that's actually even paid. And that gave me a head start for my thesis as well, because now I've actually spent 2 semesters engaging and kind of collecting data for my professor. And based off of that, I was able to do my thesis with her for my final year. and really building that connection, right? So having long-term connections with different professors can be really helpful, because then it can help with those reference letters. And even when we're writing those reference letters, really asking professors, do you feel comfortable, or do you feel comfortable that you can write a strong reference letter for me? So that we're making sure that our application, we're actually setting ourselves up for success. And even when you're asking for a reference letter, it's okay to kind of give them information about yourself, because sometimes they don't know everything about you. They just know that you're doing this one thing for them, or they just know that you're attending class and you're at the start, like you're at the front of the class and you're always asking questions and your grades are great. But they can also, like, if you give them information, they can talk about how you're balancing a lot of things. They can talk about just your commitment. They can talk about the things that you're doing and highlighting pieces that you actually want them to highlight, right? So really working with the professors on your application and even getting advice from them is really, really helpful.
Yeah. I just want to say I love how all of your experiences in the past are so interconnected and like have helped you get to where you are today. So I just love that like so many things helped you get to where you are. Yeah, that was lovely. I guess to go off of, we were talking about like reflecting on your time at university, but now in terms of getting a job, was finding a job in the mental health field that you were interested in easier or harder than you had anticipated? And what is a job market like in this sector? Are there a lot of opportunities? Are there a little? What's your opinion?
Yeah, so on your comment about, getting jobs in the field, I think I've actually gotten, and I got advice at the start of my like start of school, and somebody told me, like, if you're gonna apply for jobs, do them in your field so that you're making money, but it's also helping you. So it's like a double whammy, right? So I would encourage people to do that. And yeah, for after graduation, finding a job, I applied everywhere. I didn't want to go home at the time. I was like, oh no, like I didn't get into a master's. And there was obviously a lot of shame. And I know a lot of students kind of go through that. And I didn't want to go home. I was like, no, I need to kind of accomplish something. I can't go back. So I applied everywhere. I applied for jobs all over, and I wasn't anticipating getting into some of them. I actually applied for some things that were higher, like they wanted more experience. And I worked after graduating at the Guelph Wellington Women in Crisis. And I didn't think I was going to get that job. And if there's one advice that I always give people is don't limit yourself in applications just because you don't meet the requirements. I think, again, the way you kind of brand yourself in your cover letter and in your resume, your determination, your willingness to learn, I think actually helped me in my work. I remember when I got the job, I was working as a part-time, as like just to fill in people's when they're like kind of like taking days off. It's called relief. I was a relief worker, and I think what actually helped was my willingness to learn, was always asking questions, was also wanting to learn, how do you want me to do this, right? And it's a lot of people around me in the workplace didn't have that mentality. They do have a lot of experience, and they're used to doing things a certain way, but not in the way that they wanted it, right? So sometimes they want fresh, no experienced people so that they can train them to be exactly how they want them. So don't be discouraged. And it was actually it was only a couple months of doing relief that people were like, okay, like really impressive how you're so willing and asking. And that was also highlighted by my professor as well, that we're always asking and learning. And then I got a full-time position there, and a full-time permanent position too. So really don't limit yourself. Apply for whatever you can in all the places. So, and if you want to work with women, if you want to work with trauma, just show that you really want to. Show that this is your passion and why, and you are a woman of color, and that you are doing these things. And I did that, and it worked. Yeah.
I really like that point of applying for things like not just things that you feel like you can definitely get, but things that are a little bit out of your comfort zone or a little bit out of your experience, because you're opening up so many more doors that way. Talking about the application process a little bit, what was the application process like applying with your current role with the CAMH? Like the application materials, what were the interviews like, and why do you feel like you were successful?
Yeah, so CAMH is one of the placements that are offered. So there is an affiliation with University of Toronto. They usually do like training, clinical training for some University of Toronto students. And they usually take between 1 and 3 students a year. So they have people that are from the Master of Education, they have some people from the Master of Arts, and then they also have PhD levels. So each department will take between 1 or 3 students, but usually actually sometimes 1 student. So it's pretty competitive. And everybody in the program actually wanted it. Even if you didn't want to work with complex disorders, you just wanted it because it was CAMH, right? And that was common, right? Like I'm not gonna lie, like a part of me was also like, okay, like it's CAMH, let me try. It would be silly of me to not try because the opportunity is there. And one of the reasons why I wanted to do it is because even if I don't want to work with complex disorders, even if I don't want to work with borderline or bipolar or, you know, chronic conditions, I think it's important to learn those skills because they come up and often they're actually like, they miss it. There's a lot of people who have it and they're not diagnosed. And even at like when I worked at the Women in Crisis, a lot of people who have trauma have similar patterns. You know, they have very complex lives. They have very complex things that are going on, and it's concurrent disorders too. So it's not just, hey, I have borderline, hey, I have trauma. It's also, you know, coupled with a very toxic environment. It's also coupled with, you know, this sometimes like, you know, abuse is very cyclical. So it's almost like familiar patterns that we're drawn to. It's also paired with unhealthy coping mechanisms that maybe were just in our environment or they were learned, right? And so you have addiction and you have trauma and you have like all these different pieces, cognitive, behavioral. And I think it's important to learn how to deal with these things at the same time, because most places don't. Most places, they will treat one thing at a time. And some pieces are actually symptoms of the thing that you're working on. So the thing that's, you know, what we're doing at CAMH is dialectical behavior therapy, which it has a hierarchy, right? It has a hierarchy of like, of needs. So if something is more important, like, for example, like suicidal ideation or anything, then that would be the highlight. That would be the most important thing. But at the same time, you will see things that are contributing, like alcoholism and things like that. So that way you can work on multiple things at the same time. And so what's really important is, and something that I really highlighted is, I want to work with, you know, complexity. I want to work with resistance. I want to be able to get those skills. And a big part of it is that we're constantly using commitment strategies. You know, it is really hard for individuals to be dealing with really difficult things and sitting with it, especially if they've been avoiding it or coping to stay away from it their whole life. So it makes sense. And at the same time, having faith in these people that, you know, they do want to make change. As hard as it is, they want to make change. And despite that resistance, knowing to sit with it and knowing, you know, how to be their cheerleader at the same time. And also there's a lot of people who are very intelligent and very successful, and that I'm not always, you know, I'm not the person that's the expert always in that conversation in the healing process. And I'm also learning a lot from these clients. So really identifying that those individuals, you know, you see the complexity of those individuals and the need, and that they are misunderstood quite often in a lot of places. So even in some of my workplaces, I would hear peers kind of, or colleagues, you know, almost kind of blaming the clients for some of the unhelpful patterns, but it's all they know, right? So it requires people who are patient. It requires people who are willing to learn. And I didn't have those skills at the end, right? I didn't have those skills yet, but I conveyed that I wanted to work with that population. And actually, I actually missed one of the volunteer things that I did, and I would actually recommend people to do it. Is there is CMHA in Guelph as well, and CMHA everywhere actually. So there's a lot of volunteer opportunities of like programs to help facilitate groups. And so I worked with teenagers, and that's what I highlighted in the application is I worked with teenagers, and usually teenagers don't want to be doing therapy, right? There's that resistance. And even though I had a difficult time, I highlighted that. I said I had a difficult time, but I want to learn those skills, right? So it's kind of understanding your own limitations is really helpful to show that I want to fill those limitations.
Wow. Yeah, Dalia, I admire your openness to learn and your willingness to take on complexity, even though that wasn't something that you were used to. That's so wonderful. You had mentioned thing about like volunteering with CMHA, and you'd also mentioned how it was a very competitive process with CAMH and being able to get a placement. Would you know about, like, are there any examples of entry-level positions with CAMH that students might be able to like look at upon graduation?
You mean like after graduating from undergrad?
Yeah, like around undergrad, yeah.
I feel like there's always programs, and I think put yourself out there, right? And even if you don't see it online, like connect with them, call them up, like see what they have open, and there'll be a chance for you to even meet somebody who's on the board or who's in HR. And usually making that contact, that direct contact over the phone. Sometimes I would see the application online. I would purposely make a call on the phone so that I could have that conversation. And then when I can send an email later and be like, thanks for the help. And like, just to follow up, thank you so much. So I think doing your research is important, right? Going out there and seeing, there's always programs out there for volunteering. Even if it's not work, I think volunteer is very, very valuable. And I think it's actually almost required to help yourself stand out, because that shows your passion, that shows that you are wanting to learn and not just to benefit for yourself.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. And I think that's a really important thing to mention too. From your knowledge with jobs in the field, you talk a little bit about your experiences, but what experiences do you feel like someone like the CMAH or any kind of jobs like that would be looking for?
You mean like to hire, or like students to look for?
Yeah.
So for myself, I know right now I'm doing a placement at CAMH, and this is a master. I'm in my master's. I'm almost done my master's, and you have to actually be like, so after you've done your master's, then you have to practice a little bit longer, supervised, and after you complete a certain number of hours, you can actually apply for the CRPO, which is the College of Registered Psychologists or Psychotherapists in Ontario. And this actually, it's a process. So you're first practicing in your placement, supervised. Then you're practicing after graduation, also supervised. And some places, you have to pay the supervisor for supervising hours. And some people will actually let you do it for free as long as you're taking on clients and adding clients onto their private practice, for example. And then after that, you actually apply, and then you become a registered psychotherapist qualifying. And then after that, you're still kind of practicing a little bit longer. You don't have to be supervised as much, but you still have to complete a number of hours. And then you actually continue, and then you become a registered psychotherapist. You report your hours and all of that. And there's also an exam. For CAMH, it is pretty competitive, and it requires a lot. It's a hospital, right? And it's working with people who are very much in need, and they need people who are very qualified. So I personally can't go back and work there right away. So I think they require you first to be a registered psychotherapist. So you have to go and finish your hours and all of that. And you have to have, I think, 3 years of experience before going back to be a registered psychotherapist or a clinician at CAMH. And I'm pretty sure probably at some of the main or biggest hospitals or mental health places like, CMHA or CAMH, I'm sure that if you're doing therapy, if you're doing, clinician work, then you would require some more experience. However, a lot of other hospitals that are not DBT, for example, they'll pick you up right away if you've done work at CAMH or if you've done work at hospitals. If you have that kind of experience, they'll pick you up right away. And a lot of also private practices. So I know that, for example, the student that finished the same placement that I'm doing last year, only in a couple of months, and she actually found a place to practice and be supervised in a private practice. So often a lot of private practices are hiring and things like that. So I think it's easy to find a job. However, if it's at a hospital, CMH or CMHA, it might be a little bit more difficult, which is why I think it's important to kind of get your foot in there right away. There's other jobs that are not clinician, right? Where you are creating programs, where you're facilitating programs, and still keep staying kind of involved with that process of teaching, of facilitating, with adults, with children, with youth, with, students. There's so many different groups. And the more you learn about that, the more you have experience and the more it will look on your resume.
Yeah. Wow. I wasn't aware of a lot of like the specificities of being able to be qualified to work as a psychotherapist. So thank you for sharing that. And yeah, we've been talking a lot about the specifics of your application process and the master's program. I guess I want to ask a bit of like a more open-ended question of what's the best part of the work that you do, and on the other side, what's the most challenging part?
So I would say the most challenging is usually when clients sometimes feel really hopeless, and sometimes they're really struggling. They feel like, or they believe that there is no way out. This is the way it's going to be, especially when they first start using skills, especially when they first start doing something, or if they make some progress and then maybe they have a day off or 2 days off, or they relapse or something into like their unhelpful habits. They feel like this is just who I am. And I think it makes sense. It makes sense that somebody would feel hopeless if they have depression. And that's the piece of that is really important, is that we don't get stuck in the little pool that they're stuck in. We need to be kind of like outside of it so that we can actually pull them out. And the best part is seeing the progress. The best part is, when they do come back and they say like, I am actually finally seeing, like, this is actually kind of working. And in dialectical behavior therapy, there's actually a lot of, it's the most, I think, intense therapy, actually. And a part of it is there's a lot of like documenting and kind of tracking. And sometimes when people don't see, they at least see that every week their ratings are changing, right? And so it's like, okay, at least we're seeing some progress. And it's really like, it's a behavioral, there's a lot of focus on behavior. So the goals that we have are not just on emotions, but, what does it look like for you to not be depressed? And then they would say, me doing my chores, me being able to go out again, me being able to like take care of myself, hygiene, all these pieces, so that even if they're not feeling as great later, they can actually reflect on the progress and knowing that they're actually on their way there. Mm-hmm. So I think it's really nice for them to see the progress and to see some changes. And I think, at the end sometimes of therapy, sometimes we'll get some really great messages from people kind of saying like, wow, like, it really changed my life. And people come in for all sorts of reasons, where it's for other people, for their relationship, their family. And then they figure out who they are. And then they create this like agency in themselves. Like, I actually want to do this for myself. I want to feel healthier. I want to be healthier. I want to be happier for myself. I want to find acceptance for my own self, rather than just kind of like being so passive to the world. So really helping them find those avenues, you can see the relief. And that's, I think, the best part.
That's wonderful.
Yeah, I can't even imagine how fulfilling that work is. Like, that sounds like, despite, seeing relapses, seeing things that feels like it's not making progress, but then being able to track over time, those measures, those small improvements, they eventually add up, and being able to see that progress and, the final product, not that there's a final product, healing is continuous and it's not linear. But that must be so fulfilling. So
exactly.
That's really nice to hear. So going into skills a little bit, we talked about skills that employers are looking for, but what skills do you feel like are important for students to develop and have experience with for a role like yours?
I think self-care and like being able to self-reflect and being aware of yourself and where you're at. And that is something that I've also had to learn, especially with at ChemH, especially when you're working with really at high risk clients. It's important for you to maintain your emotional regular self, and that also requires work. So it's active maintenance of your mental health, and that means that we need to not overwork ourselves as well, right? Mm-hmm. So it means that we need to also model the things that we're teaching. That self-care is really important. That taking those breaks is really important. Even if we have all these things, sometimes even just half an hour break and just being mindful, practicing mindfulness, exercising, eating healthier. All of these things are all contributors to lowering our vulnerability so that we can be better professionals, we can be better supports for others. And that's what we teach our clients as well, that, you know, if you want to be there for your supports, your family, your partner, your children, whatever, you need to also take care of yourself so that you could do a better job. And so it's learning to balance those priorities, those competing priorities. There's school, there's work, there's ourselves, there's family, there's like all these plans. And it makes sense as we grow up, as we kind of reach different milestones, that our lives are going to become more complex, and we're going to continue evolving and making those changes that, you know, maybe some things that are self-care aren't working for us anymore. That's okay. We continue, we're more active with it. And I think that's what's really important. That's what PMH people look for as well, is that, you know, somebody who knows to also like regulate themselves and sit with these things and be mindful. So something to continue to like start practicing, if anything.
Yeah, I love that you mentioned that, because I feel like students are always thinking about like, okay, what are the transferable skills that I need to have for this role, like that I want to do in the future, but they often forget, like sometimes it's all about just looking at yourself and what you need to focus on first. So I love that answer. And by the way, Dalia, thank you so much for having this conversation with us, because there have been so many things that I've learned in this like conversation that's only been like, what, an hour or just under an hour. But I did have one last question, and that's, you've also started your own company, as we know. So can you tell us a bit more about it and what that experience has been like?
Yeah, this is actually super exciting. And so the name of the company is Mind Easy. It is a mental health benefits platform for corporations, and, you know, just wanting to expand on it. And it's actually for like multicultural and like cultural sensitive therapy, because we don't have much of that. And, you know, as a person of color, my own experiences trying to get therapy, and even other people of color that are around me, they all kind of struggle to get therapy that really identifies and addresses and doesn't shy away from these difficult conversations. So it's really important to have these things that, you know, sometimes, you know, there are other things happening around the world as well, like with the pandemic, like, you know, BLM, people are grieving, people are seeing other countries really struggling with COVID. You know, I actually, the way it started was, it started with my roommates, actually. So one of my roommates is, you know, she does startups and she does business, and my other roommate is like in tech, and then I'm in psychology. But we're all people of color, we're all women of color, and one of my roommates was going through a difficult time. She's from Lebanon, and it was right after the Lebanon explosion, and so it was really difficult. And I was trying to support her and give her resources, and that was helpful. And it was also really helpful when I gave her like a specific contact, a specific therapist that helped her with the language barrier. This is somebody who spoke English, Arabic, and French, so that when she did want to convey her emotions, she was able to do that. You know, somebody who was able to address those identity pieces. Some people, you know, there are different parts of us that bring a lot of strength from our culture, from our traditions. And it's not just all trauma. It's not all just like discrimination and being marginalized. So it's really important that when we are targeting these issues, that we're able to pull from those strengths, that we're aware of what's going on in that climate, of this person's, you know, collectivistic nature, or their specific patterns at home, or what, maybe not what they're thinking, but maybe what their parents are thinking, what their family is thinking. So being aware of these things can really shape therapy. And so we're creating this platform for employees, so that they will have access to it. And we're actually building like an app so that it's kind of really engaging. You can monitor and track these pieces of like your health. It's really like promoting you to engage with these like reflections and kind of identifying where are your strengths, the way that you kind of view and perceive your experiences, and also your pains. Like different cultures actually perceive stress differently, and they perceive coping differently. And some cultures pathologize a lot more than others. And, you know, it could actually be more of a disservice to some people than others, and different generations as well. Like I can tell you, you know, my parents and other parents of like immigrants are often, you know, they've been in survival mode their whole lives, and that's what has worked for them their whole lives. And so, you know, telling them that they need therapy might make them feel like they're broken, but that's not the case. It's about kind of like what would be helpful, what would improve your relationship, what would improve, reduce anger, like maybe anger management, some stress, so getting them a chance to kind of reflect and identify those pieces, to promote them to kind of work on it and engage, to reduce the stress, to increase productivity, to help them actually reach their goals outside and inside of like work.
That's amazing. I admire that. And as a person of color and a woman of color myself, I admire the work you're putting in to make sure it's culturally sensitive. So thank you. Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah, so I think that's the end of our questions for today, Dalia. Honestly, you gave like so much valuable information there, like some of the practical application pieces, but just also I think just sharing your wealth of knowledge around just those little pieces that helped you out. So trying out little things when you were in your undergrad. I loved, you know, how the other students had mentioned, like you did volunteer, you did do some work experiences, you kind of dipped your hand into a bunch of different pots and really saw what stuck. And obviously that led you to where you are now, and we can kind of see how passionate you are about your own company that you're kind of getting off the ground, and that's so exciting to see. So thank you so much for taking the time to share these ideas with us today. We really truly appreciate it.
Thank you so much. And I really admire that, you know, students can have or want to get this knowledge. And I wish that I had somebody to give me this. I'm so excited to be giving it to students, and go for it and try as much as you can and reach out for as many things, even if it doesn't lead you anywhere. It's like a staircase. It's like one level after the next.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Awesome. Okay, well, everyone, thank you so much. Take care now.
Hi.